Yo, what's up guys? It's the new sensation, Big Annotation here, and today I'm going to be profiling the Supreme Kai deck with all of the new dash pack support that we've been getting. And I recently played this deck in the most recent European Zenkai Cup event, and managed to place third, going 5 wins and 1 loss throughout the entire event, only losing the last round. And yeah, it was all round a very fun event. I do definitely feel like I could have, if I played just a little bit differently, I could have taken it to first place, but that's just got to work on myself as a player. I don't play a lot of aggro decks, and I would classify this as an aggro deck, so I do think that I had a bit of a learning curve going into the deck, because there's a lot of decision points that you can make with this deck. There's a lot of different ways that you can play it turn by turn, because the deck has like a lot of removal and a lot of defensive tools, but also a lot of ways to just push very aggressively, so you kind of have to decide how much you want to be pushing each turn and how much you want to leave open for defense. So it's a very fun deck to play, because you get to free play a lot of stuff. You get 2 overarms a turn, but it's also a very rewarding deck to play. You have to just like be able to figure out what the opponent's deck is going to be able to do at each turn, and how you need to prepare your turns to deal with their turns, as well as being able to keep putting the pressure on, because eventually your deck is probably going to run out of steam faster than some of the other decks in the game right now. So it's a very rewarding deck to play in that part, because there's a lot of decision making that goes into each turn. So I highly recommend it. And also it's a very strong deck at the moment, in my opinion. It has some very powerful turns, and especially with the new SCR that's come out, like it just takes the whole deck to a whole new level. And the dash pack support is amazing as well. So to quickly run over my matchups going over the Zenkai Cup, I started off by playing against 2 Red Sins. Managed to take the win on both of those. I do think Red Sin is lost a lot of its power from losing Haze Shenron, because they have to. A lot of people have been just using the Oceanus to find the ball now, instead of looking into just charging Z energy. Because I think you can awaken with 6 or more Z energy, so you don't necessarily need the balls, but a lot of people still use the Oceanus to find those last couple of balls. And it just means that they have less options when it comes to giving barrier to some of their battle cards, which makes the matchup a lot easier to deal with, because the 4-drop isn't getting crit, and you're not getting double strike critted on your turn 2, and then the 8-drop isn't going to have barrier as consistently, so it's a lot easier to deal with those 8-drops. And then I played against Green Majin Buu, which was an incredibly close game. I do feel like I misplayed that one slightly. I should have been playing more to counterplay his Floodgates, which I didn't end up doing, but we'll get into that later with the actual deck profile. Then round 4, I played a mirror match against Supreme Kai, against my teammate who was also playing Supreme Kai, and we have very similar lists going into it, because we obviously we're discussing a lot about the build, so it is unfortunate that I had to play against him, but shout out to Michael as always. He's probably the best black player in Europe right now, and if you guys want to see his deck profile, I'll imagine he'll have it up on his YouTube channel very soon, so I'll have a link to that in the description down below, because his explanations might be a little bit better than mine, because he's a lot more experienced with this kind of playstyle, and he's a very strong player and a very good player when it comes to these black decks. So we managed to take the win there. He did have some unfortunate draws, so I do attribute it a lot to that. I do think that had we had fairly equal draws, he probably would have taken it, just because his knowledge of the matchup is a lot better than mine. And then round 5, I played against SS4 Goku Xeno, which is I think it's a set 10 leader, set 11 leader. It's another black deck. It's the sort of counterpart to Supreme Kai at the moment. It gains double strike on the backside. It's another very strong black deck at the moment, but I don't think it has the consistency that Supreme Kai has. And then the last round I played against Trunks Cheetah. I played Josh from Team Deck Planet, and he managed to take the win against me. I do feel like I overextended just a little bit too much going into my turn 3 on that one, which was unfortunate, because he was able to punish me with his SCR plus Mirror plus Oolong next turn, which was, yeah, obviously a very powerful play, and there's not a lot that Black can do to deal with that. So that was pretty much my matchups throughout the day. Like I said, went 5-1 and only lost the last round, so overall pretty happy with that, with a 3rd place finish. Definitely showing that Black is absolutely still in the game and still very capable of a lot of things. So we'll just run over the deck quickly. As for the leader, I'll try not to break down too many of the cards because a lot of the cards are quite old, so I'd imagine most people would know what they do by now, but I will try and go over some of the dash pack cards. But the leader is fairly simple. You burst 3 and draw 1 on attack, and then you awaken, you go down to 6 life, and you can awaken at 4 or less life, or when you have 8 or more cards in warp, and they don't have to be black cards, which is great if you mill your champer. And then on the back side, when you overwhelm, you draw a card and you put 3 from warp to drop. You can also activate main for 1 energy. You can discard a card to play your Unison from your warp or your drop, which is great because effectively, like, you can always recycle your Unison every turn, and it just turns a card in your hand into your Unison. But it can also equalize like drop area maths. If you have 5 cards in your drop and you have your Unison in warp, you can leader effect, play your Unison from warp, discard a card that puts you to 6 in drop. Then you can overrun 6 for a big guy. It just sort of solves a lot of things for you because it will also make the deck very consistent, because you just need to see the 1 copy of the Unison and you're set for the game, and you can even just mill it on the front side burst, and then once you awaken you can just start replaying it anyways. And then the strong effect on the backside is you can crit a life, put 2 cards from your warp back to your drop, and your overwhelm stick about for the rest of the turn. So that is obviously a very powerful effect. You get to keep a massive board of these like very strong overwhelms that will give you lots of advantage over time, and yeah, it can become very, very oppressive. So for the Unison, we're running obviously the 4 Demigra. Gives you Wormhole the first time you activate Overwhelm, and then sometimes fixes your drop area with the +1. The -3 never came up for me in the actual Zenkai Cup, but in testing it's come up a couple of times. Just if you draw the extra copies of the Unison, you can slide 1 under when it's on 2 markers. But most of the time people were like really trying to kill my Unison so that I'd be forced to pay energy each turn to play it with my leader. Which is a very, it's definitely a good strategy against this deck because while the deck can do a lot of free play with the overwhelms, it does like to use its energy to sort of go into its more tech pieces, like its removal from the Z deck and just like cards like thwarting or also leaving energy up for defensive purposes. And then going into the new dash pack cards, we have 4 copies of the Sun Goten. This card is like absolutely snapped. This card really puts the deck to a whole nother level. It's effectively thwarting, but you can play it from warp. That's what I like to think of it as. So it's got an overwhelm 6, double strike 25k. And when it's played from your hand, you draw a card, but it's also got an activate main limit 1, where if you pay an energy, if you have a Trunk Xeno on board and you have 2 or more energy, you play this guy from your hand or your warp. So in theory, you can play 2 of these guys every turn. You can overwhelm 1 from your hand, and then you can play 1 from your warp if you have the Trunks. And you get the draw if you overwhelm it from hand, obviously, because it's played from hand. It does have a permanent where if it leaves the field, it's removed from the game, so you can't recycle it endlessly, unfortunately. But like, it's a thwarting that you can play from warp. You mill it off your leader, and you feel like all of the endorphins rush into your brain because you've just overwhelmed a Trunks, and then you can play it from warp instantly. Like, it's an insane card. And then, like, the fact that it's double strike means that there are turns where if you can get your opponent to 2 life, you just overrun this guy in, play another from warp, and 25 double, drop a champer on your leader swing, and it just gets stupid. So in terms of the Trunkses we're running 4 Trunks Time Regulator. It's very important to have a good balance of overrun 3s and overrun 6s in this deck, because you need overrun 3s early on, so that you can set up your leader awaken fairly easily, and just so that you can make use of your burst effectively, because you're bursting 3 per turn. And especially in games where you don't see your Unison turn 1, because a lot of the time you don't even want to drop your Unison turn 1, because that just makes it quite susceptible, and you can't take full advantage of the wormhole by that point. So it's nice to have these low to the ground overrun 3s, and this guy obviously is a Trunk Xeno, so it synergizes with the Sun Goten, but it will also help you filter, and there's a lot of cards in this deck that you want in your warp anyway, so the warping a card from your hand is like not a big cost at all. So you can warp copies of this, you can warp your SCR, which, spoiler alert, is the evil Saiyan that plays itself from warp. You can warp the Gohan rares. Like, there's a lot of targets that you can just drop into your warp and it's fine. And this card is also very important for setting up your leader's awaken. as are the other two overarm 3s which we're playing in the deck, which I'll get into in a bit. Because of the simple fact where if you go second and you overarm this on turn 1 because you swung with your leader, that's 3 cards in your warp from your leader swing with the overarm 3. Then you draw 2 warp 1, that puts you to 4, and then at the end of the turn this guy goes to warp, that puts you to 5. And then your next turn you swing leader, burst 3, and then you overarm another 3 and you get to 8, and then you can awaken. So like in terms of the maths, this is perfect because it just sets you up for awakening after 2 of your leader swings, which is great. And that's what we aim to do with each of the overarm 3s in this deck as well. And then for the other Trunks Xeno, we're on 4 of the new Trunks Dash Pack card. This card is really insane. Me and Mikey were originally running it at 3 copies, but he had the idea to up it to 4. I can see myself cutting it down to 3 because in the actual Zenkai Cup I did not use this as much as I thought I would. I was using it a lot in testing, but I ended up just not dropping it so much as I thought. So like maybe it goes back to 3, but honestly 4 is fine, and there's not really a better card that you would play over the 4th copy of this card, I feel like. So it can just give you that flexibility when it comes to like charging extra copies if you need to. But yeah, this card is insanely nice to have. Overarm 6, dual attack 19k, and every time it swings it combos a 5k from warp. So it's effectively a 24k. And then you start to consider the fact that this deck doesn't really build Z energy, and this card like solves all of your problems because you can then build Z energy with this guy, and then it also gains like, it starts to really accrue value once you keep it around for a couple of turns with your leader skill. Like that's really what we're looking for with the overarms in this deck, is big overarms that can gain a lot of value when they're played, but also accrue a lot of value over time if they can stick about. So it just kind of puts your opponent in tricky spots where they have to deal with your board, but they also have to prepare for the insane stuff that you're going to play next turn as well. And so these are kind of the cards that you want to look for when you're going first, especially the Trunks, small Trunks, and the Goten. Because if you go first, you can't swing with your leader on turn 1, obviously, and then it goes to your opponent's turn. You don't really do much on turn 1 if you go first, you just charge and pass most of the time. And then it comes back to your turn, you can swing leader, burst 3, and then overarm in this Trunks, and then because you'll be on 2 or more energy, you can start bringing in Gotens from warp. So that's why you want to be looking for those 2 cards in your mulligan if you're going first. And then these cards upcoming is what you want to look for if you're going second most of the time, which are 4 copies of Revived Ravager Vegeta. So again, a very nice early 15k overarm, so you're going to get a swing with it. It's a 15k crit as well, so it's perfect. And it also sets up your early awaken because again, it's going to fill up your drop area. So say this is the first overarm you play in the game, you overarm 3 after you swing with leader, you mill another 3, and then going into your next turn, you swing with leader again, you mill another 3, and you've set yourself up for an overarm 6, and that will put you to 9 or 10 cards in warp, assuming this guy went to your warp as well, and that will let you then awaken as well. So again, we're really looking for these early overarms that are also going to just help you fill your drop or warp that little bit extra so that you can awaken on turn 2 or turn 3. And this guy really puts in the work for that, and it's also crit, so it's going to get you that instant plus if you ever swing with it. And the reason why you want to be searching for this card if you go second is because if you're going second, you can obviously swing with leader, then you can overarm this guy in, get a 15k crit swing in, which is a lot more value than the Trunks 15k non-crit swing, obviously. And then you can ideally drop this guy, which is one of the most broken cards Black has got recently, which is the Marseillan Belligerent Warrior. This guy is a 1 cost if you have moved a card from your drop area to your warp that turn. Its auto is limit 1, so you only really play 1 of these per turn. But when this card is played, you choose up to 2 of your opponent's battle cards, send them to the warp until the end of your opponent's next turn, and this guy becomes crit for the turn. So he's a 1-drop 20k crit that effectively warps 2 guys for a turn. So you don't have to deal with 2 of your opponent's guys on board for your opponent's next turn. You can also use it to remove combat power, obviously, when you're pushing to go all in, but you can also use it to remove tokens because there's no cost restriction. He also removes secret rares, and then if tokens or secret rares get removed by this guy, they don't come back because they get removed from game. Yeah, this card is insane. Like being able to just 1 energy clear off a token and get a 20k crit or just like remove threats that you don't want to have to deal with for your next turn is really insane. But also just the fact that it's a 1 energy 20k crit. So like turn 1, if you go second, you overarm this in, and then you play this for 1 energy, and you get 2 crit swings in and your leader swing. And like they're not going to be comboing out of these swings, or if they are comboing out of the swings, then they're losing a lot from hand. And then you're set up for an overarm 6 next turn because of the revived Ravage of Vegeta, and then you start to just pop off because you overarm 6, you then awaken, you start to keep your overarms about, and then you just, yeah, your opponent can't really recover from that most decks. And then another new card that this deck has got, which was like fairly recent, but it's from a recent tournament pack, is the Son Goku Xeno Reflexive Strike. Now this card is actually really nice for a couple of reasons. So the first being that it's again another Overarm 3. So these are our copies 9 to 12 of the Overarm 3s that we're playing. And the main reason why we want to be playing this card early on, this is arguably the weakest of the 3 Overarm 3s, but it's still not bad because it still sets you up for that early awaken because of the card's activate main, where you send this guy from the board to the warp to draw 2 cards and warp a card from your hand. So effectively this guy is like a weaker version of the Trunks Overrealm because he's a 5k rather than a 15k, so he's not going to get that swing in, and he also warps himself, so if you want to keep him around from your leader effect, then you won't get the draw, which obviously you're going to value the draw over a 5k body, but just for in terms of purposes of comparing it to the small Trunks. But it does set you up for that early awaken because you're overarming 3, that puts you to 3 in warp, then you warp it to draw 2 and warp 1 from your hand, and that puts you to 5 in warp, and then your next burst from leader is going to get you to the awaken point, which is great. Now the other couple of reasons why it's good is again, it is a 5k Goku Xeno, so this is obviously going to set you up with thwarting targets for your super combos, and hence we are running the 4 Vegeta Xeno super combos and the 1 thwarting. But some other reasons why this card is great is because it also has an activate main limit 1 where you discard this card from your hand to search top 5 for a Goku Xeno or a black Vegeta Xeno. So we do have a couple of good targets in this deck, and I have rarely whiffed off of this card, but it also sets you up for drop area maths if you're missing a card in your drop area that you need for an overarm, which does actually come up quite a bit. You can just discard this to search top 5, you can grab your super combos, you can grab the overarm 3 Vegeta, the crit guy that we just covered, and you can also cover the grab the next card, which is the Beyond All Limits Goku, and you can also grab copies of itself, so like if you just need the extra card in drop, you can just grab another copy of itself, and then you've set yourself up for an overall, which is great. So there are a good few targets in this deck for this card, and there are times where I just pitch it specifically to try and find a super combo because I want to make sure that I can live that until the next turn. And then the other reason why this card is sick is because of the counter skill. This guy is a cooler counter for black, specifically for Supreme Kai of Time, because the counter skill is only if your leader is a Supreme Kai of Time. But for 3 energy, you negate the counter, you play this card. And then the reason why I compare this card to the cooler counter is because obviously it's 3 energy, but also because when you do that, you then play this card, and then you can warp itself to draw 2 and warp 1. So it's not quite a cooler counter, because if they have the 6 cards in rest mode, cooler is going to be better, you get to draw 2, you get a 15k body. But if they have if they were to have less than 6 cards in rest mode, this guy is better, because you can cycle more. You get to see 2 cards and then choose a card from your hand to warp, as opposed to just drawing the 1 card. And then, like, the fact that this is an aggressive black deck that then also has a counter is really why this deck is so snapped. The main thing to look out for with this card is you do kind of want to be using the counter on your kill swing rather than to stop any floodgates. That's something that I learned the hard way in my match against the Trunks Cheetah, but also I did kind of keep an eye out for it in testing as well, and we have got a card in here to try and mitigate for that as well. But you do want to mainly be using this to deal with a counter that's going to stop you from killing them specifically rather than floodgating them, because it is 3 energy in a black deck. If you use it early on in a turn to stop a floodgate and they have other ways to defend, then it's really going to screw you over. And then thwarting and super combos is kind of obvious, so I won't go into too much detail there. Beyond All Limits is like the most broken overround that they've ever released. I think this card is insane. The fact that you can grab back almost any card in the deck just whenever you need it. So you can grab back Marseilles if you need to deal with their board, or if you want a 1 energy swing, you can grab back thwarting as many times as you want throughout a game. You can start grabbing back your Kai negates, which we'll cover in a sec as well. But you can really just grab back whatever you need for the situation, which is what makes this card so good, and is where this deck starts to become a little bit more tricky to pilot, because you have to start considering what you want to do each turn before you actually start playing out your turn, and that then leads to having to play around cards very prematurely with this deck. I am running the 1 Dark Broly Overrealm. I don't think this card came up at all throughout the Zenkai Cup. It's a very situational card. There are times where you just need a free way to deal with a token negate rather than paying the 1 for the Marseille or the Majin Buu in the Z deck. So there are times where that comes up. There are also times where you just have 2 energy open early on, and you just play this guy from your warp, or where it gets later in the game, you start to run out of cards in hand, and you just play this guy from your warp and play a couple guys from Z deck to try and finish them off. That does come up as well. So I do think the 1-off is still worth it, especially because you can then just grab it back with Beyond All Limits whenever you need to. But this is definitely one of the weaker cards in the deck, I would say. And then, I've said it many a times already, this card is broken as fuck, and you need to be playing this in your black decks. Just the fact that you can take, like, 2 life doesn't matter in black anymore with this card existing, because you can take them from 2 to 1 with this guy, and then you get a 40k swing, you get whatever you stole from your opponent, let's say a 25, 30k swing, and then if they use a battle card negate, you steal that as well, and then swing with that as well. So it just gets really, really stupid with this card. The activate main can remove tokens, it goes through barrier, as does the auto, because the auto doesn't choose. You get to look at your opponent's life, you get to, like, this card is just insane. I think every time I saw this card I won in Zenkai Cup. The only times where I would, like, struggle to win or where I lost was where I didn't see this card. The difference in power level in this deck when you see this card compared to when you don't is, like, absolutely astonishing. This card is so insanely broken. And then paired that with Champa as well, making this guy a 40k double strike swing after you've warped one of their life, taken one of their battle cards, and the next card they play is going to get taken as well, is, like, really stupid. Combining these 2 cards, and if you ever see these cards together, it's, like, so impossible to lose. It really gets stupid. And then the cards, so for some sort of anti-floodgate stuff, we've got Super Kamehameha. Mikey suggested this, putting these in when we had a couple of games where I would just get floodgated out, I'd slam the counter, and then just lose to, like, further negates down the line, which I found very frustrating. I think that this card is one of the weaker cards again in the deck, but, like, there are just matchups where you need it, especially against yellow with Riposte. So I think that it's still worth running, because, like, there will be turns where you need to be killing them that turn, and you swing and they riposte you, and you can't counter them because they'll just negate further down the line. They'll use a token negate to stop your big kill swing or anything like that. And then that's where this card will really shine, is to just stop those floodgates so that you can save your counter for later in the game or later in the turn. So I do think this card is very, very important, and it definitely comes up in matchups where you need it to. And then in terms of our defensive cards, we're running 3 Support of the Dark Empire, 3 of the Kai Negate, and 2 of the new Gohan Rare. So yeah, these cards are pretty much going to be standard, I feel like, going forward for a lot of black decks now. In terms of their defense, obviously token negates are amazing, the Kai negates are really strong, especially in this deck because it's so easy to set up, but also the fact that you can then recycle it consistently with Beyond All Limits. And then the Gohan Rares are just, like, incredibly good in any black deck that can burst or, like, warp its the top cards of its deck, because it's effectively like a sparking negate that you don't have to use from hand, which is great. And it also gives you a body on board for next turn. It is limit 1, but that's absolutely fine. Like, there are times where you just use it to protect your Unison on your opponent's last swing, or protect something on your board, and you develop a 15k body for next turn, which is great. And it also cycles you a card, because if you take the card from life and it's an amazing card that you want to keep hold of, you just bottom deck a different card from your hand. So it's not like you're critting a life in that sense, which is good. Then in terms of the Z deck, it's pretty standard for black. Black doesn't have a lot in the Z deck right now, but it does have some very, very outstanding cards. It just doesn't have enough of a range of them, I feel like. So we are running 3 of the new Majin Buu from the Dash Pack. This card is insane. 1 energy, 25k that absorbs a card every turn and just eats it is ridiculous. And the fact that it can, like, one of the strengths about the Z deck is that you can use it as another way to sort of load up your drop area where you're maybe missing 1 or 2 cards in there for an overwhelm. You can just pay an energy for one of these Z battle cards, and then you get 2 more cards in the drop from your Z energy, and then you can start overwhelm shenanigans again. But the fact that this guy eats token negates as well is like insane. This deck has so many ways to deal with those token blockers. In the SCR, the Mars Saiyan, and then this guy and the next card which we'll cover, which is the Pan. I only have 2 copies of this for the Zenkai event. The 3rd copy never came up, but it's definitely worth having a 3rd copy instead of one of the next cards that I'll show. So there will definitely be games where the 3rd copy comes up, but like these 2 are really the only cards in the Z deck that matter, honestly. The Pan, just being able to replace the life that you crit off your leader effect, so you're effectively keeping your overwhelms around for free every turn whilst loading up your drop area more, is like really insane. And then the fact that she removes any battle card every turn is like really, really strong as well. Again, another way to deal with token negates with that bond 3 skill. Then I am running the 1 SSB of Vegeta surmounting the impossible. This again has never come up, but like you might as well run it rather than not run it. It's just a card that you might as well have in there. And then we're running the 1 SS Son Goku for the mission. Basically none of his skills are relevant for this deck except for the activate main, which is where he gains 5k for every 7 black battle cards in your warp. This card also never came up. You should definitely be running 3 Pans instead of this card. But I don't own 3 Pans right now, so we're just running this card and it's fine. So that is the Z deck. Now, for those that don't know, the European Zenkai Cups have all been best of 1 pre-side so far. So we do actually have a side deck for this event, which was very nice. Although probably worked a good bit against me considering I was playing an aggro deck that's meant to take people by surprise. But, you know, I'm sure it's fine. So the first card I was running was 2 of the Black Mars Saiyan. This guy's effectively a bean for 1 energy during your opponent's turn. It is a 0 combo power card, which is frustrating, but I do feel like it's like a decent card for strategies like AOD or any sort of 15k, 20k swarm guys. This card is going to do a lot of work for those, and like just having the flexibility of, again, being able to grab this back off beyond all limits is huge. I feel like in decks that can like reliably drop beyond all limits, specifically this deck, because you could in theory drop 2 per turn, which is huge. You can just run like a wide range of toolboxy black cards that you can grab back off beyond all limits in your side deck and a couple of techs in the main deck, and then like it'll just work out because you'll be able to find the cards that you need for each specific situation off of that beyond all limits. Then I was also running 1 Bardock the Tenacious and 1 Protector of the People. The main reason for this is I don't own a second Bardock the Tenacious. It's like a rare from set 11. I should own it. I don't own it. I just own the 1. So don't run Protector of the People. This card sucks. I didn't side this in once, I don't think. Or in the matchups I did side it in, I didn't see it or it didn't feel good. You definitely want 2 Bardock the Tenacious just because of the fact that, like, well, the whole card is better, but also, again, you can grab it off beyond all limits, so, like, it's easily accessible, and it's much better. Just run 2 copies of the Bardock. And then I was also siding 3 Shin Noble Supremacy. Shout out to Andre for lending me these as well. This card is how you win against SS4 Gogeta. Unfortunately, I didn't get to play in the SS4 Gogeta, but like against that matchup, you just stay on 3 energy and keep dropping this turn after turn. And that is what I did against one of the, I think it was the first Red Sin that I played against. I saw 2 of these in my opening hand, so I just kept it. I was going second, so turn 2 I dropped one of these, turn 3 I dropped one of these, and then turn 4 I dropped my SCR and killed him. So like he was never able to establish an 8 drop on board. I forced his Z Awaken on one of the turns that I dropped one of these, so he wasn't able to clap back on me all that much either. And then we just like forced him down to 3 life already, dropped SCR, and it was pretty much game from there. This is a tech from Mikey, again, best black player in Europe. Like he just knows his shit, honestly. The SS3 Tag Team Son Gohan. This was specifically for blue decks that we thought would be running the Beast Gohan SCR, because you can drop, when they drop the Beast Gohan, they obviously bounce everything back to your hand, and then you can drop this guy to block one of their crit swings from the Beast Gohan, which is great. Really nice defensive tool. I did side it in a couple of times. I think I sided it in against Mikey, but I didn't end up seeing it like at all throughout the whole day. But it's definitely a very nice card to have in the sideboard. Again, it's searchable off of Beyond All Limits, and it just comes up in a lot of different matchups, I feel like, as well. I was also running 2 Dabura Ritual at Hand. These are the cards that I didn't side in just because I didn't play against really any matchups that I thought warranted it. I probably should have sided this in against Green Majin Buu, but at the time I didn't think it would be that heavy on hand control. Ended up being a lot more heavy on hand control than I thought it would be. But again, like, this card is recyclable off Beyond All Limits. You can start to see why that card is completely snapped. 2 Son Gohan Changing History. This is for if I played against blue. I don't think I played against a blue deck all day, which was unfortunate because I really wanted to play against blue with this deck. And then 2 Koitsukai. This card also just didn't come up very much. I found that most of the decks I played against were going to play a maximum of 1 Floodgate a turn, and I already had Super Kamehameha and the counter in the main deck. So this card is more for those arrival-based decks like Android 16, Cooler Mill, that kind of thing. So again, didn't really come up. But this card is really nice in the deck because you're obviously already milling yourself, and you can put it back from your warp if you ever overwhelm it. So that's absolutely fine there. But that is the whole deck profile. So that's obviously the main deck, side deck, and Z deck. Hopefully I've covered everything. If you guys have any questions, of course you can leave them in the comments below. And I definitely recommend checking out Mikey's channel as well, my teammate from T-2. And like I've said before, probably the best black player in Europe. I'll have a link to his channel down below if you guys want to check out his deck profile, which should be up fairly soon. We'll see, I'm not sure. But other than that, thank you guys as always for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you guys in the next one.